Hello, I'm Enzo, and welcome back to Gregtech New Horizons. This is part 3 of my series. You guys should definitely check out the first 2 if you haven't already, because you'll probably have no clue what's going on. At the end of the previous episode, I was working on these multi-block Steam machines. These things are amazing. In between episodes, I've been working on expanding my base and creating an unholy amount of steel. Both of these are going to overlap because I actually want to make more multi-block machines and upgrade a couple of the ones I already have. The 2 machines that I'm going to upgrade from bronze to steel are the Steam Squasher, which is the compactor, and the Steam Crusher, which is the macerator. These are 2 vital machines that I'll be using for an extremely long time, even once I get into powered machines and everything like that. That's just how useful these things are. But yeah, this is just replacing blocks. Nothing else too interesting here. The next machine I want to make is the presser, aka the hammer. This can easily replace the hammer in most operations and is incredibly useful, not to mention extremely fast. It's also far more efficient than the normal Steam machines, which is very nice. The first use I actually had for it, which I wish I had known way earlier, is to actually make coal. You see, I've been smelting all of my coal ore into, coal, but apparently you get double the coal if you use the hammer instead. That sucks because I probably wasted dozens of stacks of coal at this point, but oh well, now I know. The next structure I want to make is the steam separator. I think this is a very basic centrifuge or something like that. I'll be completely honest, I barely use this thing. It was a major waste of resources, but it was fun to play with a couple things that I made using it. It also sucks because it's incredibly complicated to build, and it wasn't completely obvious that one of the blocks was in the middle. Yeah, it's a mess. Honestly, all of the multi-block structures have been extremely annoying to make up to this point, and I'm scared because they're only going to get worse as the game goes on. Thankfully, I will eventually get actual blueprints to build these things and an actual overlay in the world, so that will be super helpful. I will say though, I really like the design of this thing. It looks like a giant blender / potion. These multi-block structures do look extremely cool. At long last, I'm going to start working on some actual technology now. Well, I'm extremely far away from getting machines and power and everything like that, but I can at least start on the missions. To begin, I need to make all sorts of wires and cables. As we know by now, this is just processing all sorts of tin and red alloy and stuff like that, using different tools to chop them down into wires, and then combining those wires with rubber to make cables. One of the basic parts I need is resistors. Now these are nice because there are several ways to make them, but for now I'm going to be going with sticky resin since I have a ton of that from all my resin trees, and I have a bunch of coal and lignite dust sitting around, so they're super easy to make. Of course, copper wire is just, well, a lot of copper. Next up, vacuum tubes. These things are one of the most expensive because they require 2 steel rods per, a bunch of copper, some red alloy, and the glass tubes, which are literally just glass thrown in the alloy smelter with a different mold. The circuit boards are also super easy because it's literally a lot of copper in copper wire form, a bunch of wooden planks, the special Gregtech wood planks made by compressing wood pulp, and sticky resin. Obviously, all of these parts are going to be super cheap because these are the most basic circuits. I mean, it makes a whole lot of sense. You have to start somewhere. As a matter of fact, I literally have everything to make the circuits right now, which is awesome. And with all of these combined, I've made my first circuit. And it only took me around 90 hours to make one of these, by the way. That is ridiculous. I am terrified of what else is to come in this pack. Unfortunately though, I can't just make a machine yet. I still need a whole lot of other things first. Before I continue with that though, I went back to the nether for a little bit, literally hollowed out an entire chunk just for the tiny chance to get lead. Thankfully, I managed to get enough lead to actually make 2 wires. Yes, just barely enough to make one of the hatches that I need to make another multi-block machine. This is ridiculous. I spent somewhere near an hour hollowing out that entire chunk, by the way, and half a stack of steel. Definitely not worth it in the end, but this multi-block structure will be very useful. This is the giant ore washer. I think this is one of the multi-blocks that definitely would have been worth it to upgrade to steel, but this was insanely expensive to build. But the ore washer does exactly what it sounds like. It washes ores. It can either be simple and like purify and then clean up dust automatically instead of me using the cauldron, or it has a more advanced mode that takes way longer, but it actually refines the ores and has a chance to give like extra dust from it and stuff like that. This is going to be one of the most useful buildings, especially later on, when I'm looking for specific tiny resources that some materials can drop. These are byproducts like sometimes magnesium or chrome that'll be helpful later on. It's also nice to get extra stuff like more tin from cassiterite sand and stuff like that. So overall, an incredibly useful building to make. Absolutely worth it to upgrade. A bit earlier, I actually hit over 1 year of days in this playthrough, which is just insanity, so I wanted to note that. I've been doing a lot of work on all of these pipes and stuff like that, but yeah, these got literally nowhere. The main problem is that I actually need a bunch of machines to make some of the parts I need to finish this whole setup. And long story short, I figured out how to make Gregtech pipes work a bit later on, and I like them so much more than the other options. So wait until then. I'll explain how the pipes and everything like that works because it makes so much sense once I start getting into real technology. Since I don't have to deal with the mind-boggling amount of pollution that this giant blast furnace setup creates, I decided to expand it to its limits, at least within this chunk. I'm guessing I could probably fit 2 of these things, but this setup alone has 14 blast furnaces. That's a lot of steel, and even more pollution, because I think you guys need a little bit more context for how crazy the pollution was in the overworld last episode. I managed to get several machines running later on, and one that creates tons of pollution, but I was running that for a while, and it still didn't get foggy like the blast furnaces did. So yeah, these things are ridiculous. Another great part about making these videos is reading all of my viewers' comments, which I always appreciate, especially because I can ask something and I'll get a bunch of answers, which is super nice. Last episode, I was trying to figure out how to get these stupid plates off the machines that I accidentally put on there, and that's what the crowbar is used for. Yes, I did not make a crowbar, and apparently this is why you need one. Well, good to know. The other major thing is XP. By making a drain and placing it on top of a tank, I can actually get XP buckets. These can be used to craft all sorts of neat things. Most of them are early game stuff, and since I have plenty of pretty much everything at this point, I don't really need most things. So I decided to go with gallium dust because it seems to be the rarest thing here. Actually, I'm pretty sure it is. Maybe glass would have been nice, but that's still relatively easy to make. I know gallium is extremely complicated to get later on, so I thought I'd go for it. So I haven't actually done the missions that tell you how to get to the Twilight Forest, but I was trying to get there on my own. First of all, apparently it's 12 flowers, not just 8, which makes a whole lot more sense. And instead of a diamond, you need a specialized item that I can only make later on. And I need to do a couple quests first, because I didn't know what item I actually had to make. But yeah, I'm going to need some basic machinery before I can create the portal. For the next component I need to make, I start by making some magnetic iron. Unfortunately, I have to use redstone to make magnetic iron. I can make a machine that'll do it automatically later on. With these magnetic iron rods, some normal iron rods, copper wire, and tin cables, I can make electric motors. These are used in a lot of machines, and of course other components. Needless to say, like most of these parts, I'm going to need a ridiculous amount of these throughout the entire run. And of course, these are only the first tier of components, by the way. It only gets worse from here on out. I also made my first machine casings, which are steel plates instead of the wrought iron plates that I was using to make the tier 0 machine casings. And to make the whole, I need some steel plates, wrought iron plates, and of course, tin cables. But of course, I can only afford one of these for now. Still, it's a massive step in progression. One important thing I wanted to mention is that last episode, I was talking about not taking damage from standing on these pipes, and it's apparently because I was playing in peaceful for a little bit. I'll say it now, I'm literally going to play a good portion of this playthrough, at least for the early game, in peaceful mode. It's just so much better. I can roam around my base without having to worry about enemies, no teleporting ender creepers. I can do my favorite pastime, which is standing on the pipes filled with extremely hot steam. I can mine peacefully, I can mine in the nether peacefully. Yeah, it's just infinitely better and more playable, at least for me. Eventually, I will re-enable enemies once I have way better gear and everything like that, but I'm enjoying this way more for now. With some tin rotors, which are just a whole bunch of tin parts, and bronze pipes, I can finally make my first steam turbine. This is the first way for me to get power. There are several other generators I can use a bit later on, but steam is what I mainly use throughout this entire playthrough, just because it's so versatile. And now here's the major problem: electricity. So apparently, electricity is quite insane in this mod pack. Machines can just, explode, start on fire. If machines explode, they can blow up other things around them. Yeah, it's gonna be a whole mess. Machines also can't be out in the rain because they'll explode, so everything has to be covered. This all sounds like a nightmare. I'll be completely honest, even at the end of this part, I still have no clue how the energy works in this pack. The game really doesn't give you enough information, but take that with a grain of salt, because near the end I did see an energy meter and the game recommends you make one, so that will probably solve most of my problems. So I guess look for that next part then. Either way, for now, energy is an enigma to me. All I know is that I'm going to make the largest wires possible and build a ton of generators. That seems to work for the most part. I've also managed to unlock the tier 2 tab, and yeah, I think I'm gonna lose my mind. As you can see by me typing here, that looks a little bit ridiculous. I know the other quest pages are pretty massive too, but this one shows me everything, well, almost everything, from the beginning, and that's why I'm terrified. This all looks so insanely complicated. Here's one of the few uses I actually have for this steam separator. It's a pretty neat thing. I can throw in rubber logs and get all sorts of goodies out of them. The most important of which is obviously sticky resin, but the methane it creates is actually super handy as a fuel later on, and it gives me carbon dust and wood pulp. And it gives me plant balls, carbon dust, and wood pulp, all of which I'll manage to use later on. They're all incredibly useful byproducts. One major mistake that I didn't realize until later was actually the circuit that I used for this. You see, most recipes are going to take a circuit, so you have to program like a specific number to get the right recipe. But apparently, the machines have a built-in ghost circuit, so that you don't need to use one of your super expensive circuits to do the same thing. But again, I've never played this before, so I did not know that until way later on, once I start making actual energy machines. But I'm glad it works like that because it's super handy. I'm glad you don't need to make multiple new circuits for each machine. You only have to pay the initial price. And let me say, the hazmat suit that you can get just by doing missions is an absolute lifesaver when I go for what I call steel runs. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. I go to refuel all of the furnaces with iron and coke coal, and I get all of the steel and ash out of it. The main problem is that this place is super polluted. It's actually at max level pollution most of the time, which is pretty crazy. I don't have to do this very often because these recipes do take a super long time, just something I wanted to note. I finally decided to make the lumber axe, definitely something I should have done a long time ago, and look at this insanity. It literally chops down the entire sacred tree. I did not expect that. But I'm certainly not complaining. That was beautiful. And it is quite literally raining wood and saplings now. This is definitely one of the ways to deal with any lack of wood in this playthrough. I mean, it's not a problem because I have the bonsai saplings, and it's gonna get really cool later on. But yeah, that was awesome. It also gave my axe a ton of XP, so I can add some reinforcement modifiers so I can chop down even larger trees. This is just too much fun. And I will completely admit, chopping these trees down is a bit too addicting. This is a redwood tree instead, but as you can see, same exact result. It's just raining lumber. Despite how complicated and ridiculous this pack is, I have to admit I'm having a ton of fun. I mean, if I wasn't having fun, I wouldn't keep playing it. I've been doing all sorts of random stuff, but one notable thing is actually exploring around the world. I found some super cool structures around the place, including this massive village that has castle-like walls. So I have absolutely zero clue like what mods are adding all of this stuff, but it's super neat. The villagers also have guards and everything like that. Most important of all though, they actually have a smeltery here. This is the first smeltery I've managed to find, by the way. That's just how bad my luck is with villages and everything like that. I've been exploring forever, and only now have I actually found something with some use to it. But I'm going to save both of us a lot of time by summing what I'm doing up. Pretty much, I'm collecting a whole bunch of ingredients and different food related items so I can make super high tier food so that I can actually submit it to the quest system and get the healing axe, which will regenerate my hunger for free. It's a pretty awesome tool. Now, I did read some comments that said it's a noob trap and everything like that, and I understand why. It's actually not too difficult to just make the unstable ingots, but since that's kind of far away, and technically you need to get into magic to make the enchanting table, but you don't, I'll explain that later on. Pretty much, I didn't think I'd be able to get it anytime soon, so I thought it would be faster to just get all of the food instead. And I will say, yes, the food is faster for me, but if I had known at the time, I could have gotten the unstable ingots even easier. Even though it's taking me forever to find what I wanted to when I was exploring, I found some absolutely beautiful biomes, like these lilac fields. Like, look how good this place looks. I am just in love with this area. And I almost want to move my base at this point. If I didn't have so much stuff, maybe I would. But this is an amazing starting biome. I mean, sure, it would be extremely annoying to deal with all the lilac that you'd collect in the end, but I guess the view is more important. It's also a major shame that there are no true oceans, at least with the normal world gen, because building a massive fleet of warships would be awesome, but this lake, I have to say, it's pretty close to what I'm looking for. You never know. Not to mention the fact that there are several more building tools that I'll get later on that might let me do what I want. By this point, I have pretty much everything I need to complete the quest. There are just a couple of issues. These water gardens are extremely rare and super hard to find. But now that I've actually found the biomes that they're in, I can finally get what I want. So you need to submit some water gardens. That's easy enough. You can actually craft them with the other gardens, so that's nice. But there is one vital ingredient that I'm missing for all of this. Thankfully, I eventually managed to find it not too far away from those water gardens. It's actually coconuts. Yes, apparently I need coconuts. The last thing I would legitimately expect. I need the coconuts to make like curry for the rainbow curry eventually. Don't know why these are in that recipe, but at least I found them. Thankfully, you can also break them by hand to get the coconuts themselves, which I brought back to my base, made a tree out of, and grew them with bone meal. It took me a while to process all of the tofu I actually needed to get the axe, but at long last, I finally have it. The healing axe. I no longer have to worry about making tons of different food. I can just hold this in my hand and my hunger gets replenished. It's awesome. There's only one tiny issue with it. I actually lose nutrition when I use this thing. That really sucks because I lose my haste, strength, and resistance buff. I also lose a bunch of the extra health that I get from the toughness buff. So that sucks, but I guess it is a trade-off for not having to worry about food ever again. Another super neat thing about these unstable tools is that they have infinite durability, so you don't ever have to worry about them breaking. I've been working on making all sorts of components for a while, and I can finally make my first machine, the wire mill. This is incredibly important because I have spent countless amounts of steel making stupid wire cutters. So I can make wires, of course. But with the wire mill, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can easily make all sorts of different wire types. The only problem now is that I actually need to figure out how to set up all of the power buildings. You see, I made this battery buffer earlier on because I thought, ooh, a battery buffer, that's cool, I'll absolutely need that. Here's the funny thing, I can't use it yet. Actually, I am nowhere close to using it because to actually use the buffer, you need batteries. Go figure. One thing I learned several times throughout this run is that I cannot have good things. Like, if something sounds too good to be true, it absolutely is. Long story short with the wires though, it's pretty much just like the pipes, but you need to use the wire cutters for all the connections instead. I guess it makes a whole lot of sense. What's nice is that you can actually click on the wire with the block you want to place down, and it will automatically connect, which can save you a whole bunch of wire cutter durability. Even looking back at the footage, I have no clue why I didn't start milling wires immediately. I mean, I'm always going to need copper and tin wires, so those would have been good to start as soon as possible. But I decided to start working on the next machine I want, which is the cutting machine. I need all sorts of interesting parts for it, including a conveyor belt. I had no clue what I created at the time, but the conveyor belt is the key that will unlock item transfer for me in a little bit. For now, there's another important part I need, and to make it, I'm going to need cobalt brass dust. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. I need cobalt, I need brass. Thankfully, a while back, when I was using the washing machine, I actually managed to get cobalt out of some sort of ore I washed. Now, I don't remember exactly what it is, but I'm guessing there are several recipes that can drop it. It's an incredibly important find because, you know, I can't really mine cobalt just yet. That's kind of a major issue, and I really want this cutting machine. For some reason, I also need aluminum dust to make this. That's a little bit annoying. And brass dust. Brass is pretty easy. It's kind of like bronze, but with zinc instead of tin. And thankfully, I have some zinc lying around from the nether. There's also this one awesome feature that I discovered accidentally. When you double click the search feature in JEI, you know, where you can search up all the items, it automatically highlights items in chests and stuff like that. Okay, I knew about that. But if you look on the map, you can actually search up certain ores in the Gregtech ore veins. Now that is pretty awesome, and it can make finding ore super easy, which is so nice. The final thing I need to actually make the saw blade is diamond dust. Thankfully, I have a pile of diamond dust lying around, so that I don't have to break any of my precious diamonds. I just need to wash it first, and then break it down into small pieces of diamond dust. It's pretty simple. The cutting machine can do all sorts of super cool things. Obviously, its main thing is it, obviously cuts things. So it replaces a lot of uses for the saw tool, which is nice. It makes screws extremely easy to make, especially in combination with the lathe, which is what I'm gonna make next. But I can also make some super cool things later on. The only problem is that it actually requires some sort of liquid as a lubricant. I'm going to be using water for now because I don't actually have access to distilled water or lubricant, but I will make lubricant relatively soon. It's actually super cheap. All you need is a distillery. You can actually use the creosote oil to make it, which in my opinion is a bit overpowered. I feel like something as good as lubricant should be locked until a bit later on, but I'm not really complaining. Besides cutting rods and stuff like that, the cutting machine can actually break down stuff like blocks into plates. So it's a cheaper way to make plates, but the bending machine is better for that, which I'll make way later on. I've been working on all of the expensive components and some more machines in the background. I just finished up the polarizer, which is great for making magnetic iron products. That's extremely nice. The extruder is good for making all sorts of things, and most important of all, the lathe. The lathe is one of my new favorite buildings because it makes rods and screws way easier to make. And most important of all, extremely efficient. You see, before making rods, I would have to use a file and a single ingot just for one rod. But with the lathe, I can put one ingot in, get one rod out, but get 2 small piles of dust back out, which means I can literally recycle half the ingot. And that makes me extremely happy to see, because now I don't have to waste literally half of my resources to make the same amount of rods. It's absolutely beautiful. It took me a little bit to get all of the resources I need for some new special parts, like conveyor belts and these robotic arms, which are extremely expensive. But at last, I can finally make the assembly machine. This is one of the most important blocks in this pack because it makes a lot of crafting recipes way cheaper than before, and, well, unlocks the ability to craft a whole lot of new things. Obviously, this is going to come in handy later on, but I had a good idea in mind for the first recipe. Even though I can make this recipe one at a time in the casting basins, that's extremely slow. To speed things up, I want to compress my gravel. Unfortunately, I can't just throw gravel into a compressor. I actually have to use an assembly machine to compress my gravel. Honestly, that doesn't make much sense, but oh well. So yeah, that's probably not the smartest use of the assembler, at least for me, because now that I know you can craft all sorts of cool recipes. This is also a bit before I learned that you can use the ghost circuit in the machine. Yeah, that's sad that I didn't know. But what really matters is that I can now make compressed gravel. Why do I want that? Well, if I throw compressed gravel into the casting basins for my smeltery and smelt down a whole bunch of tin, I can actually make something called brownstone. Brownstone is a slightly early version of concrete. Okay, well, not the blast furnace concrete. This is concrete that actually lets you move faster when you walk on it. This is amazing for building bases because, well, movement speed is everything. I say that and make the most inefficient base designs in existence, but oh well. It's one thing I've been meaning to make for quite a while now, and it'll let me make things a whole lot quicker because I can move things quicker. Another thing that's very important to mention at this point is that I had no clue how long processing all of the diamond stuff would take. It literally takes 2 times as long, in the cutting machine at least, with water compared to lubricant. That is insanity. I really wish I'd known you can actually make lubricant out of creosote oil earlier on, but now I do, and I'm going to set that up pretty soon. Because the quicker I can create things, the less power it uses, which is pretty important. Especially considering I'm currently burning some of my creosote oil to create power. Those are the 2 generators in the back with the wood pipe leading to them. And another thing I didn't realize until recently is just how long all of the diamond stuff would actually take to make. And unfortunately, the higher tier and more expensive the part, the longer it'll generally take to process in these machines. Like, every single one of these diamond recipes takes several minutes at the very least to process. So yeah, it's gonna be a while before I can actually get diamond chests. At the very least, the screws are super fast. Most of the screws are easy in the lathe because it just takes a bolt as the input and a couple of seconds, sometimes even less than a second, which is super nice, and boom, you get the screw. I absolutely love this system. It's so much faster and more efficient than before, but I'm extremely excited because I can almost make my first diamond chest. This means I can increase my storage space, which is pretty important considering how backed up my chests are getting. To get the distillery I need to make lubricant from creosote oil, there are some special parts I need, including rubber rings, which actually require a rubber plate and a knife, oddly enough. Later on, I will get the liquid solidifier and a ring mold so I can actually make them from molten rubber. It's a way easier recipe. I guess way easier to make thing does summarize pretty much a lot of the parts, especially at this point. And I guess I didn't show it earlier on, but here it is again. After a while, I've collected even more diamond plates and screws, and I can make, well, you can guess, more diamond chests. I don't really have anything else to say, I'm just glad I finally have more storage space. Besides creating lubricant, the distillery can do an incredible amount of things. One super important use is actually making biogas. Remember all that methane I was creating earlier from the logs in the mixer, from the logs in the steam separator? Well, this is the best use for it. The methane can be burned on its own, but if I refine it into biogas, I can use it to create even more power, which is awesome. The only annoying thing is that I need another new type of generator because this is a gas. I started out with steam. I will be using way more steam later on, trust me. Then I swapped to fluid for a while in creosote oil, and now I'm going to gas. This is an extremely important part of the game that I'm about to show you guys. I've been trying to figure out this electric pump thing. And again, because I've never played this mod pack before, I had no clue how it worked. But like I was saying earlier, this is the key that is going to unlock so much potential for me. The electric pump is one of the items that can be used as a cover, just like plates can be put on these pipes. Certain covers can do certain things, and in this case, the electric pump actually has the ability to export, well, liquids, or gas, because gas and liquid are technically the same. I mean, kind of, but not really. Whatever, bear with me for a minute here. Once I figure out how to get this electric pump to actually work, which you have to shift right-click it with an empty hand to open up the interface and then change the mode to export instead. And once I do that, it'll automatically remove liquid from one container and put it into a pipe. It is incredible. And just like that, I finally started to move liquids on my own. I don't think you guys understand how important of a discovery this was. I can start some true automation, which is awesome. Of course, this is just for pipes. When it comes to item pipes and stuff like that, you can use the conveyor belt attachment. There's also the robotic arm, but I think that's for inserting items into specific slots. Either way, this was a crazy cool find. And as you can see here, I've been using this knowledge to automate my coke ovens for real this time. This means I literally never have to touch these things again. I just have a crate for input, a crate for output, and of course the creosote oil tank. And from there, all of my coke ovens are completely automated. This is beautiful. It's nice to have some real automation around here. I will never get sick of watching these trees fall down. This is just too much fun. The more I cut down, the more I can level up my axe. I eventually would like to get reinforced 10 on this axe so that it's literally unbreakable. I also made a bunch of the forestry backpacks so that I can carry all of this wood. These 3 backpacks will let me carry literally an entire sacred tree home. That's just a tiny bit ridiculous. I love it. I may have also doubled the amount of coke ovens I have. Yeah, this is pretty awesome. Eventually, I did add 4 more to the end, but for some reason, they just wouldn't get wood. The creosote oil wasn't being extracted. I'm pretty sure there's some sort of like pipe length limit or limit on the amount of exporters you can use, something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but the last 4 coke ovens just never worked properly. And I know I did all that talking about the steam centrifuge earlier, but the basic centrifuge, the machine version, is literally better in every single way. It's also far easier to extract items from it because I can just use a hopper. The old one was getting backed up, and that's why it was so slow. A little bit later, I went to the Nether to collect some iron, and here's the result of when I clear out an entire vein of a resource. It's quite awesome. This filled up several backpacks worth of iron, and that's great because I'm going to be making lots of wrought iron for pipes. There's a cool building I've had my eyes on for a while now, and apparently it can just create water for fuel. The parts are quite expensive because I need a lot of steel, pistons, glass and stuff like that, but for creating a tiny bit of pollution, 150 liters of water a second is a lot of water, especially for the cheap price of fuel. Now, I can use pretty much any fuel in these things, including like diamonds if I wanted to go crazy. So this is a great way to get some more water for free, or set up water somewhere else where I need it, which is super nice. And I'm not 100% sure how I caused this or why, but yeah, I physically cannot exit this menu at this point. I know for a fact I pressed every key and tried everything, but no, I'm literally stuck on this menu. I had to force quit the game to actually get out of this. Thankfully it all saved. A little bit later, I managed to finish this setup where I have this massive iron tank and 5 of these Stirling generators. I learned a little bit later that the Stirling generators will keep using fuel even if their water is full, so there should definitely be demand for water when you use these things. Either way, they're incredibly handy, and that means I don't have to run a massive water pipe all the way to that tank. One of the machines I should have made way earlier on is the bending machine. It has all sorts of uses, but the most important use is making plates. Even though the cutting machine can technically do the same, the bending machine is dedicated to plates, so I don't have to use like blocks in the cutting machine. I can also make the smaller foils and other plate-like products with it, which is super neat. This thing is just so incredibly useful. And most important of all, it is a 1-to-1 ratio for plates. No more 2-to-1 or 1.5, just 1-to-1 ingot to plate. Wonderful. I haven't really shown this much, but at least for now in this tier, I have tried to make like several dozen different recipes for everything, but since I'm only in LV, the first tier of energy, there are still a lot of recipes I can't actually do just yet. I either need the second or third tier to do the recipe that I'm looking for. Great example is right here. I'm trying to make double steel plates using the bending machine. Unfortunately, the tier is insufficient. That means I have to go back to using the hammer. I'd rather not use the hammer because making double steel chews through them, but I don't really have a choice, do I? I've been working on a small new industrial branch. That's why I made that massive water tank. Next to it is a smaller steam tank that'll act as a steam battery, and of course a boiler. This time I went with a solid fuel boiler because I have a bunch of compressed charcoal blocks. Yes, you can do that. The burn time is unreal later on. But yeah, this is where I'm going to set up my next set of machines. For now, the only machines I've made are a couple of macerators. But this is just the start. You see, every single ore has several different ways you can actually process it. Obviously, it starts with the crushing. Then you can throw it into an ore washing plant, and generally I'll be throwing it into the ore washing plant if I want more out of it, or I can just smelt the crushed ore. It truly depends on what I'm looking for, but most of the time it will just be crushed and then washed for extra resources. Later on, I'll get a couple of other buildings like the magnetic separator, which is pretty awesome. It's only really good for stuff that has iron in it and iron-based resources, and the thermal centrifuge, which lets me process pretty much everything again. The major issue with the thermal centrifuge is that it eats up tons upon tons of power, so I only use that like near the end of this episode when I absolutely need something. One last thing to mention with the ore washer is that it can take either water or distilled water. Now, I can actually make distilled water. The primary issue, and something I figured out later, is that it's super difficult to produce enough distilled water in time to fuel the ore washer, because the ore washer goes faster with distilled water, which means it chews through more of it. It's a whole mess. Eventually I'll probably build like a massive water distillery setup, but until I figure that out later on, I will just be using water because it's infinitely easier. Besides hoppers, machines do actually have an output port. I learned that way later on, and you can automatically export fluids or items through that port. But obviously there's only one, so if you want to export like fluid and liquid, you can pretty much only do one or the other without having conveyor belts or pumps. Anyways, I made this fluid extractor so that I could start getting oil from seeds. Why do I need seed oil? Well, there's this super cool stuff called garden soil that I can make. It's a combination of sand, dirt, and seed oil, and it needs to be manufactured in an assembly machine. It's some super cool stuff. It allows me to plant crops on it, and I believe I don't need to water them when I put crops on it. And yeah, I think it's just good soil all around. I don't know, I just saw it in a mission and I knew I wanted to use it. I'm using this new garden soil in an area behind all of my coke ovens, and this is going to be a brand new farm. I'm going to be planting oak bonsai trees, but I will replace them with jungle trees later on so I don't have to deal with the apples. But pretty much this garden is going to be managed by a crop manager. It's a neat but expensive little building. It uses a very tiny amount of power, and it can manage an 11 by 11 area of crops. It's pretty awesome. This means I can start automating all sorts of crops, but for now, and well, in this episode, I'll only get trees to work. I did try some other crops, but they didn't work, and I'm not sure why. To solve one of the problems I have right now, I decided to finally make a redstone clock. I needed all sorts of red alloy stuff, gold components. It was super annoying to make, but now I have it. So what am I going to use this for? Well, I'm going to be using the redstone clock to automate my smeltery. Why is this important? Well, remember earlier when I was talking about the lathe and all of the byproducts it creates? Well, it's nice that I can recycle steel now, but the primary issue is that I either have to throw the steel dust back into a blast furnace or the electric blast furnace that I'll make way later on. And as you can probably guess, neither of those options are good. Also, if you saw that, yes, a chicken did wander into my base. Have no clue where that guy came from, honestly, but it's pretty funny. Anyways, the best way to process the steel back into ingots is actually by throwing it into the smeltery. It's literally my cheapest option available. The main problem is that it takes forever for the molten steel to cast back into ingots. With the redstone clock, I can automate this and just let it run, empty out the entire inventory of the smeltery, and boom, I can recycle all of my steel. That's super nice. Also, I have been skipping over a lot of little things that aren't super interesting, but one thing I thought was cool is using paper as a cover for pipes. You might have seen it a little bit there, but I ran a tank from my distillery for methane into biogas back into the generators so I could store a whole bunch of it up, and since I just put the pipes where the floor should be, it looked pretty ugly. So I decided to try out paper covers for those pipes, and it looks extremely similar to my marble. So I really like that look. And thank you to whoever commented that. Another neat thing about the crop manager is it can actually water the crops for you automatically. I don't think that's necessary. I honestly have no clue if it helps because I'm pretty sure the soil already has water in it, but I decided to add that anyways. For the power, I'm obviously going to be using steam, but pretty much whatever power source I choose, I would have to route all the way over here instead. I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but one of the biggest issues with power in this playthrough is that the energy wires actually have power drop off. For every wire, you actually lose some power to the next one. That's why you want to make your cables as short as possible, at least at the beginning of each tier, because you will get lossless cables later on. But obviously, losing power is a bad thing because that means your generators have to work more, you'll need more generators. It's super frustrating, but I guess kind of realistic. Anyways, I have the crop manager working now, and boom, that is automatic wood. Not completely. I will set up some pipes later on to put it into that, but either way, that's a massive step in progression. I'm getting super close to automating my creosote oil for good. That means I'll have truly automated power. As you can see, I've been doing a whole lot of stuff, and I finally managed to upgrade my steam battery. This is a far larger iron tank than whatever that was before, because the old tank was honestly just sad. I also upgraded both of my boilers, liquid and solid, to 3x3s, but I will be completely honest, this is not great unless you're running 1,000 steam machines, because they just take up way too much fuel to be worth it. You'll see it a bit more later on, but I eventually just settled for a 2x2 boiler again. I think that's literally the perfect size for most uses. If you need more steam, you literally just build another 2x2 boiler. It's that simple. I don't think the 3x3s are worth it. Here's the electromagnetic separators in action. For this example, I'm using the limonite dust, and it's pretty neat because I get some extra small pieces of iron. 4 of these create 1 iron dust, and some iron nuggets. 9 nuggets create an ingot. That's all super exciting. Obviously, these aren't guaranteed. I think both of them are a 10% chance, but still, being able to get extra resources out of anything is pretty awesome. And a little bit ago, I made this chemical reactor. This has all sorts of uses, especially later on, but for now, I can make rubber with it. Okay, so what? I've made rubber before. Well, this recipe is far more efficient than before, and most important of all, it makes molten rubber. With molten rubber, I can actually throw it right into an assembler to automatically coat cables, which is just awesome. Eventually, I can also use a fluid solidifier to make specialized parts, like rubber O-rings that I need every so often. This entire time, I've also been working on another branch of machinery. We all know my first one right there that has all of my ore processing. My second one is going to have all of the machines that I've been using originally. So the bending machines, the wire mills, alloy smelters, centrifuges, all sorts of stuff like that will go on there. This is so that I can split the power and not have too much load on one wire, and so I can also place a bunch of new generators there. Another thing I did not too long ago was throw a bunch of my sticky resin into a centrifuge. This is pretty neat because it gives me plant balls, which will come in handy later, and refined glue. This stuff has a lot of uses. Now, there are several ways to make glue, and one hint that the game gives you, even earlier on, which is pretty funny, is the fact you can actually just throw a horse into a smeltery. That is very cruel, but one way to get glue for sure. Either way, since I haven't done that this run, I'm going for other sources of refined glue. In this case, of course, it's sticky resin from rubber logs. Also, this is the fluid extractor, not the centrifuge. That's what I'm actually looking for right now. And I set the output to a fluid solidifier so that I can actually get the solid glue balls. These glue balls have all sorts of uses. They can be used as a replacement for slime balls, or melted back into glue if I need it for other uses. Overall, some very useful stuff. I absolutely love these machines. I can also throw these congealed green slime blocks, which you get from the slime trees, into the centrifuge to get refined glue and the raw rubber that I can eventually turn into molten rubber. This is what I'll be using for all of that from now on. I've completely moved from rubber trees to these slime trees. They're just so much better. Unfortunately, you can't make either into a bonsai tree, which really sucks. That means I have to do all of this manually, but it is possible to create a sticky resin plant. I just have to get a whole lot more into plant breeding, and I'm not 100% sure where I'm going to go for resources. I definitely need to try out more bees and more plant breeding, but who knows when I'll figure all of that out. Another comment I got, if I remember correctly, was saying he had played this pack for like 10 years and has never seen a hybrid tree. Well, guess what? There's a second one. What are the chances of that, by the way? For one of my next projects, I was looking for some very specific items. When I was exploring, I happened to finally find an Enderman spawner, which is awesome. And yes, I am still playing in peaceful if you're curious, but as you can see, these dungeons are still extremely dangerous. Mostly because I forgot that there are actually trapped areas like that. Oh well. To make a very, very long story short, I'm looking for a secret room inside of these dungeons. The secret rooms always spawn on the second floor, and they are incredibly rare, but they are relatively easy to find if you know what you're doing and, well, you look at the map. It's pretty broken. This is one of the two secret rooms. It's inside of the Wizard Castle dungeons, and it has an enchanting table. This means I don't have to do all the annoying magic stuff just yet. Here's the main problem. That's not the one I was looking for. I mean, sure, the enchantment table is nice and all. I can use it to activate the division sigil and make more unstable ingots, but I want the other secret room, because the other secret room actually has a brewing stand in it, which also means I don't have to do the magic to get it. And while it's certainly not dozens, I swear I've searched like over 20 of these dungeons. I'm not even joking. I found 3 of these in total. That's how rare they are. Anyways, it's a reference to Attack on the B Team, that super old mod pack, which, you know, Attack of the A Team reference there. But of course, I'm just here for the brewing stand. There's plenty of books, which is nice, but yeah, I got what I want and now I'm out. The map is also great for locating the loot games, but yeah, I've still never played Minesweeper before. I have no clue what I'm doing. Perhaps someday I'll learn it, because it is a super cool game, but yeah, I don't know any strategy or anything like that. There are apparently other types of loot games as well, but I've only found Minesweeper out of like 5 of these dungeons. Also, every so often, you'll see that my hand is back to Steve instead of my Kashino skin. I don't know why it does that. I think it has something to do with the launcher not getting internet connection. I'm not sure. Doesn't matter, just wanted to note that. Anyways, I've been working on making these. This is what's gonna let me go to the Twilight Forest. It's literally just a diamond and 4 LV circuits in an assembler. Now, I made 4 of these, which is kind of stupid. I really thought it was gonna be a one-way use, but no, it actually just activates the portal, and the portal is permanent, as long as it doesn't get destroyed. Now that I can go to the Twilight Forest, that's obviously my goal. There's all sorts of new ores that appear here that I really want. The most important of which is obviously lead. I'm going to want a ton of lead for all sorts of resources later on. Here's the tiny issue. I spawned in the Naga arena. I did not expect that. I didn't even know this was possible. So naturally, I ran out of it because I had no clue how difficult this boss would be. And I'll be honest, I've only played the Twilight Forest a couple of times in my life. Obviously, I know about it. It's one of the early original Minecraft mods. How could I forget about this? I mean, I even remembered how to make the portal. Well, almost. I apologize for how bad the FOV looks because of the speed boost. I got that from sleeping. There's nothing I can do about it. But the speed does help quite a bit because I decided to try and fight the Naga. It's like this giant lizard thingy. The name sounds Japanese to me at least. I don't know where it's from in mythology, but either way, it's a super neat little boss, especially for the time these bosses were created, by the way. Thanks to my powerful armor and playing on easy mode, I wasn't taking too much damage, so it was a relatively easy boss. Once I killed it, I got some cool loot and some scales. I believe all of these are going to be used for some magic stuff later on, so I'm definitely keeping them. But now it's time to start what I actually came here to do, and that is mine all the ores. The best thing about the Twilight Forest is the fact that the elevation is super low. I know you guys can't really see it there, but the Z is 30 plus at the highest. It's not super tall at all, which means I don't have to dig down very far to get the ores. And once I found the ores that I was looking for, I realized now why I play in peaceful mode. The mobs are an absolute nightmare to deal with when I'm just trying to peacefully mine. So naturally, I will be going back to peaceful mode. Again, I'm having so much more fun in peaceful. The Twilight Forest has a bunch of its own ores, including magic stuff. Obviously, I don't care about those just yet, but it has the most important of which, lead. And some other neat ores I found were from the overworld. There's the iron and copper veins, but there's also graphite. The graphite veins have diamonds. We all know what that means. I can get more diamonds here, and super easy at that, which is awesome. Like I said, I absolutely love mining in the Twilight Forest. One of the veins I was mining down into actually had a ravine underneath it. That was terrifying. Thankfully, there was some water at the bottom to completely break my fall. But then I started to remember, sure, I've been playing a lot of Minecraft mod packs that have different world gen, but I have to admit, I have not seen ravines in vanilla Minecraft in years at this point. I swear, there are none in the modern versions of Minecraft. And once I returned home, it's time to sort all of the goodies I got from there. Well, of course, it's mostly ores and stuff like that. I've started sorting all of my ores into different chests based on the place they originate from. Since a lot of ores do come from the overworld, those chests are definitely going to overflow first. Since I'm running into yet another water problem because of how much steam I've been creating, it's time to make even more of those water tanks. But instead of the sticky resin recipe that I've been using forever now, I can actually make a slightly different recipe now that I have steel. Using steel rods and congealed slime blocks that I've been harvesting, I can make even more water tanks than before. This is amazing. Sure, it is a bit more expensive because it's steel, but I think it's far more worth it. I still have the original setup I made up here. I just need to connect all of these new tanks to the pipe network. I did the math, and this creates almost 300 liters a second. That's quite a bit. I mean, sure, it certainly could be more, and I will need more as we go later into the video, but this will be great for now. And yeah, as you can see here, this was bound to happen. I did not click my glider in time. I mean, that shaft literally is the fastest way back down. And the issue is that since this is a valley area, the hang glider has a tendency to actually updraft and go higher. So to do that, I have to disable the glider, fall for a bit, re-enable it. You guys can figure out what happened. Like I said, I knew it was going to happen at some point. Now that I have an actual source of lead, there are all sorts of things I can do with it. The first one is combining it with antimony. I think this is from the Nether, if I remember correctly. Pretty much lead and antimony create what's called a battery alloy, and you can probably guess what it's used for. I mean, it's literally in the name. I can now create batteries. Well, not just yet, because there are still a couple of steps I need to complete before I can get batteries, but this gets me one step closer, which is very nice. So to create the batteries, I actually need to turn the ingots into plates. That's easy enough. Then, with some tin cables, I need to make small battery holes. Now, I will get different sized holes later on, but not in this part. I'm just going to stick with small batteries since they're easy. And, as I soon learnt, these can't just be used as batteries. Of course not. I actually have to throw them in a canner with certain resources to turn them into real batteries. I guess it kind of makes sense. They need some sort of conductive filling that can hold power. So I have a bunch of options, just like in real life. Sodium, cadmium, or lithium. And obviously I'm going to go with lithium because it's the best capacity. The problem is that obviously it's the most expensive at the same time. So I need to go mining and get some of those ores. I've been working on making these advanced boilers. They're pretty neat little things, but they are extremely expensive. The main differences between the advanced boilers and the multi-block boilers that I'm using is that they produce less steam. Okay, well, they produce a whole lot more for one block, but less steam in total. But they're extremely efficient because they only burn fuel when it's required, so only when they need more heat. And best of all, they don't explode if they have no water in them. I mean, that hasn't been an issue up to this point, and surely it won't be an issue in the future, right? If I were actually smart, I would have made like way more of these things and replaced my other boilers entirely. I'm guessing that's one of the better plays I could have made instead of just continuing to use solid and liquid fueled boilers. These are just so much better. They just didn't produce enough steam that I actually needed, and that's why I stuck with the other boilers for so long. I've been chewing through so much steam that I actually need the crazy production amount of the larger boilers. Another thing I wish I knew earlier was crafting the circuits in assemblers. Okay, not the circuit themselves, but all the circuit parts that you need. The circuit boards, the vacuum tubes, the wires, all that good stuff. They're so much easier to make in assemblers, and on top of that, there are a couple different recipes. Based on the recipe and what materials you use, you can actually make them for far cheaper than before, which is super nice. So I'm going to be switching over to this to make everything from now on. Thankfully, I can melt down a lot of my old materials, like the red alloy, and just throw that liquid into the assembler. That makes it super easy. Same thing with like the circuit boards and diodes. I can literally just use the glue that I've been creating so much of to easily make them. For a little bit, I've been working on macerating all sorts of materials, and gathering a whole ton of lead. So what do I need all of these resources for? Lead, tin, and bronze. Well, that's an odd combination, and it just happens to make a material called potin. This is some pretty cool stuff. It doesn't have many uses, and it's not extremely strong. So why do I want it? Well, potin is extremely good for making pipes. And using potin to make pipes will give you way more throughput than any other pipes at this point. It's even slightly better than steel, which is very nice. You know, considering how expensive steel pipes are to make, especially the huge pipes. And on top of that, I can actually make the double plates in the bending machine in LV, or use a hammer to make them. That's awesome. I'm loving this stuff already. You guys were probably wondering what I'm going to use all of those brewing stands for. I know I talked all about getting them and everything, but I didn't explain what I'm going to use them for. Well, obviously, brewing machines. I mean, what else would I make them for? Brewing machines can do quite a bit of stuff. They can make all sorts of drinks and stuff like that, but that's not the reason I want them. I want the brewing machines so that I can actually make ethanol. Well, in a little bit. There's a couple of steps I need to go through first. To prepare for this setup, I started replacing a lot of my steam network with the potin pipes, which means that I can power more machines at once, even though I don't produce enough steam just yet. And I'm going to add a third power line to my industrial area, which means I need to go craft more steam generators. Alright, this setup isn't the best, and I will fix it later on, because that's when I realized how to face the machines the right way and everything like that. But pretty much, I want these breweries to make a biomass. biomass. I have just tons of plant balls from all sorts of different recipes. I'm going to throw those into the breweries with water to make biomass. Biomass can go into a distillery to create ethanol. Ethanol is a great source of fuel, and I'm guessing it has some other uses for chemistry and stuff like that later on, but the fuel value is why I want it. I'm not going to be burning it just yet, but I'm actually going to save it for a little while. And yeah, that's the entire reason I spent so much time and effort finding 3 brewing stands. I literally just wanted ethanol. I could have easily skipped all of this as they're way better fuel sources, especially considering what I'm going to work on soon, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to try out. But at some point when I was configuring my pipes, I ran into a mild issue. For some reason, steam happened to get into my water line, so the ore washers weren't working properly. And, well, I discovered what happens when you put water into a hot boiler. That's bad. That killed 2 boilers and destroyed most of their blocks. That destroyed part of my tank, and a lot of expensive pipes at the same time. I knew they exploded, but I kind of didn't think about that at this time. Thankfully, my advanced boilers are still alive. Those are the most expensive. But yeah, this stings to have to rebuild. Forgetting about that little incident, I upgraded the 3rd power line even further with more machines. As you can see, I'm creating 3 different products now. One is lubricant from creosote oil, since I'm only using a solid fuel boiler on this level now. I still have tons of creosote oil and not many uses for it, so lubricant is obviously pretty important. I was just talking about ethanol, and the 3rd tank is going to be distilled water, which we've already seen. It's extremely simple. I just wanted to store a whole bunch of this stuff. And since my chests are getting so full of resources, I finally decided to make a small storage array. For now, this is all manually sorted, and I didn't do it in this episode, but I am hoping to automate storage very soon, likely at the beginning of next episode. By throwing some of the ores I've recently mined into the ore washer, I've been able to finally get lithium. This is super exciting. Even though I could use sodium, I would like the best batteries available to me. I'm super excited to finally start making batteries. Even though I have plenty of steam, it'll be super nice to get some actual power storage started. Not like I'm gonna actually use it or anything like that, because the steam is working perfectly fine. That's kind of the funny thing. But these batteries have several other uses that are going to be super neat. To make them, like I said earlier, you literally just take a canning machine, your filler of choice, and of course the battery hulls. It's a super fast machine, and just like that, I finally have batteries. That is so exciting. After looking through all the recipes and quests, I knew exactly what I wanted to make with all of this battery stuff immediately. That is actually going to be new tools. Well, not new tools, but an upgrade to my old ones. You see, there are some tools that you can actually make electric versions of, like the wrench and screwdriver, and that sounds awesome. And I'm gonna say this now because I thought it worked differently, but unfortunately, these power tools do still break. They just break at a far reduced rate because they consume power. They still have their own durability. I was hoping these things would be permanent, but of course, if it sounds too good to be true, in this pack, it absolutely is. I still have to worry about normal durability, and I have to charge them on top of that. So it was kind of like bait to me. I thought it was going to be so much better than it actually was. They're just replacement tools, really. I've been scrolling through crafting recipes for a while, trying to get one that I can just autofill, but now that I found the part I need to make, it's way easier than I thought. Why am I making tools out of Damascus steel, even though I can't make it yet? Well, thankfully I've already looted some previously, and I decided, well, if I'm gonna make these expensive tools, I might as well make them out of the best material I have, which is, you know, Damascus steel. The other nice part is that these tools are relatively cheap, at least for the material like the head is made out of. I know these look a bit confusing because it uses some normal steel parts and some Damascus steel, but otherwise they are pretty cheap. It's always steel stuff for the body, and then for the head, it's Damascus steel. For the screwdriver, it's a long rod, which is 2 normal rods combined, each of which are only 1 ingot, or half if you use the lathe, but I can't recycle Damascus steel yet. And for the wrench head, it was just a bunch of plates, which we already know. I have to manually craft these because I can't find the autofill recipe, but they are super simple. And now I have an electric wrench and screwdriver. To charge the batteries, you just have to throw them into a battery buffer. Now, I was a little confused on how these things work at first because they have a wire output, and that output is actually for the power. So you can connect a wire to any other side and that will charge stuff inside of the buffer. But the wire output will, well, output the power to that line. It makes a whole lot more sense now. I've been gathering all sorts of resources for a little bit now because I have a mission. Remember that ethanol that I've been working on earlier? This is when it finally comes into play. The reason I want to make ethanol, well, because of the cool path and using plant balls, is so that I can use it as a fuel. It has a massive fuel value. I think it's like 192,000. I'm guessing that's per one of these containers. So I think for now, it's going to be a great portable fuel option. I have all my tools, I have a bunch of blocks and machines, it's almost time. Also, I don't know when it happened, but there's another oil well near my base, a smaller one, but at some point it got struck by lightning as well. And I was like, alright, I don't know what I was going for there. The major problem I'm facing is actually how to get all of the fire off of this oil well. You see the issue here? Water and oil don't mix, so the water doesn't flow over it and the fires just climb back up the well. This is great. I have to figure this out on my own now. It took me a little while and a whole lot of damage, but the solution I finally came up with was literally building around the entire thing with blocks. This was just the best way to get rid of all the fires. It's a bit stupid, but it works. And remember, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. Eventually, this is what it looks like. I built this little structure at the top of the well. This is where I'm going to place the oil pump. And of course, I covered it so that the machines don't get damaged by weather. The basic pump is a super cool little building. You have to throw these mining pipes inside of it, which those are super simple. It's literally just steel pipes thrown in a wire mill. But then I noticed a slight issue. Yeah, you cannot swim in oil. Now, I kind of figured this, but the problem is that I actually can't get out right now. I'm literally drowning in oil and there's nothing I can do about it. Thankfully, I got to the bottom and mined my way out, but that was still pretty scary. Back at the top, now that the pump is set up, all that's left is to connect a generator. Thankfully, these pumps don't consume much power at all. It's actually pretty crazy how cheap they are. I was grabbing more blocks when on my way back to the oil well, I saw a third well in the distance that was also on fire. I was like, seriously? A third one? Who knows how many of these things are on fire because of lightning at this point? It's got to be quite a bit, and it sucks to deal with each individual one. Anyways, the smart play here would have been to connect the generator directly to the pump. I mean, I'm only losing like 1 extra unit of power, but I could be losing 0 instead. Like I said though, the pump is so cheap that it legitimately does not matter. Plus, this ethanol supplies so much fuel. Like, I think I only used 3 or 4 containers of fuel in total. The pumps do have like a certain limit, no matter how many pipes you give them. I think it's like 90 or something like that. So I really hope I can get the fuel back out of the generator. It would suck to lose like 10 things of ethanol. Either way, it's super exciting to see the pump working and extracting my precious oil. I love watching the pump consume the oil and then the pipe go down one. I think it's just so neat to watch this thing work. Another neat little thing I set up is a centrifuge. I'm going to be centrifuging some of the brown limonite dust I have, which is iron, but it's interesting because it's FeHO2. When I throw this into a centrifuge, it creates hydrogen and oxygen, but you lose some of the iron as a result. This is perfectly fine to me because I want oxygen and hydrogen for some stuff later on. Also, the pink hydrogen and light blue oxygen is absolutely beautiful. Those are my favorite colors. I mean, Oxygen Not Included is one of my favorite games, and that's how they look in there. I had the not so bright idea to try and investigate the inside of the oil well. Let's just say it didn't go very well. Now you might be wondering, why didn't it go well? I mean, you remember what happened with the oil earlier? Yeah, I cannot get out of here. There's no way I'm surviving this, and there's no way I'm going to be able to get back here and get all of my stuff. It's going to be way too complicated. So let's just pretend that this little expedition never happened. I mean, sure, it's cheating a little bit, but come on, we all wanted to see what the inside of an oil well looked like. An interesting fun fact is that you also seem to sink in oil in creative mode, and apparently this well was built on a tin vein the entire time. So that was pretty interesting. To start basic oil processing, I made this massive setup with 8 distilleries. And yeah, I didn't know how the batteries worked at this point, so the battery buffer does not work. But I'm currently making 4 different oil products. There are technically 5 you can make, but I already have lubricant, so I don't need that. And there are 2 distilleries for each one. They're all distilling their own separate things, which I need to collect to complete different quests and stuff like that. And for now, I'm actually just burning the oil to make power. I need a couple more generators because I'm definitely not making enough power. But it's not anything super interesting just yet. For my next side project, I went back to the Twilight Forest. This time, I'm looking for these live roots. Now, there are roots everywhere, which make it super annoying to mine here, but these live roots have several cool uses. You can make a bunch of neat tools and some armor with this stuff. So I'm going to collect a bunch of it and bring it back to my base. Combining the live root dust with gold and iron dust, I can actually make an alloy. Ironwood dust. It's some interesting stuff, and this is the metal I'll be using. I only need it to make a pickaxe. I didn't actually have to make this much of it, but I mean, why not? This pickaxe is super unique because it allows me to mine cobalt and ardite at this stage. There's nothing else that will actually let me mine cobalt or ardite just yet. This is pretty awesome. It's cool to get these ores early, but at the same time it's bait because I literally cannot process them just yet either. While I can process them, I can't make them into minoleum that I would like to. Another thing I was working on is upgrading my farm. I also wanted to automate the aluminum, iron, and gold ore berries, so I did that. There's just one slight problem. Even though they're on crop sticks, the machines have power and everything like that, for some reason they just would never get collected. Obviously it took a while for these to grow and me to discover that. I legitimately have no clue. The only thing I can think of is it has something to do with their tier. Maybe the machine isn't high enough tier to collect them. It's pretty tragic because that was a lot of time and resources wasted doing this. But hopefully I can make this work later on because I'd love to automate these. Now, to combine some of the work from my last few projects. For a while now, I've been trying to make a new machine. The problem is it needs a special part that I can't make easily. Finally, I have all the resources required to make it. So I need polyethylene. And that sounds complicated because guess what? It absolutely is. To start out, I need all sorts of gases and stuff like that to make it. Starting out, I got some refinery gas, which is one of the products I got from distilling oil. Next, I threw that into a chemical reactor with steam. That gives me moderately steam-cracked refinery gas. This is just getting ridiculous. I am dumb and I was trying to put that into another reactor, but it actually has to go into a distillery instead. Distilling the moderately steam-cracked refinery gas, that gives me ethylene. And we're just one step away. The last thing to do is combine oxygen or compressed air with ethylene to make polyethylene. This is ridiculous. And again, this is just the beginning of the game. I don't know how much worse this is gonna get. But combining polyethylene with carbon dust in an autoclave will give me carbon fiber. This has all sorts of uses, but if I throw it just in an assembler, I can make carbon mesh. Carbon mesh is actually what I need to start making the filters. Naturally, it doesn't stop there because I actually need zinc foil if I want to finally make the filter. And I need 2 of them to build the sifting machine. There are other ways to make these filters. Both ways are super complicated and they both require polyethylene. So I just decided to go for this one. Not to mention, the other recipe requires a bunch of steel. It's actually not that much, but I do have a ton of carbon dust lying around, so I thought, why not? They're very similar. And naturally, this recipe takes 80 seconds to produce. Once I have 2 filters finally, I get my sifting machine. This is awesome. The sifting machine is neat because it allows me to get certain resources out of stuff. Up to this point, I actually haven't had the ability to get flint easier than the beginning of the game. Like, yes, I still had to use a mortar to grind up my gravel into flint up to this point, but now I can throw gravel into the sifting machine and get a ton of flint out of it, which is nice. Flint isn't used all the time anymore, but it's still required for some things. The most important use for it, though, is going to be diamonds. Instead of just getting one diamond, well, one normal diamond from one piece of ore, I can now crush up the diamonds and get double the crushed ore, which is nice. Now, even though my ore is doubled, I'm not always guaranteed to get a normal diamond out of it. I can get diamond of higher tier or lower tier. But this is perfectly fine because I will be getting more net diamonds in the end. And the higher tier and lower tier diamonds have other uses as well. Eventually, I'll be able to combine them to make normal purity diamonds. Either way, getting progress like this is always super exciting. You know, I've completely forgotten how this setup works at this point. All I know is that it uses oil, it burns oil as fuel, and it distills it into light fuel somehow. It starts out by distilling the oil into a product, then that product gets combined with hydrogen, which I have a little electrolyzer for. Those get combined to make light fuel in the end, and yeah, that's this setup. Pretty simple. That's pretty much what this app does. It's not the greatest setup, and I am hoping and I can improve on this design a whole lot, but I want to save up light fuel for a while because that's what I'd like to use as my next main power source. Anyways, I was AFK minding my own business when I get these achievements. I mean, that certainly cannot mean anything good. Bad weather and electrical problems. Well, I had a horrible feeling about this. Naturally, the only thing I can assume is that something bad happened to my oil setup, and it certainly looks that way. Where my oil setup should be, there is a giant crater instead. My machines have exploded. My electrical system has exploded. I was not happy at this point, to say the least. It took me so long to figure all of this out, and it's just gone like that. All of that expensive machinery, gone. I lost 2 million liters of oil, which is 2,000 blocks, but at least I got to keep my light fuel. Why did this happen? I have absolutely zero clue. I had the entire place covered, yet I still got bad weather for some reason. It's raining, but there's no lightning. That's the only thing I could think of that did it. I legitimately have no clue why this happened, and I am mad. So I decided I was done. No more explosive machines. The only problem is that you actually have to save and quit to apply these changes, because I'll get to deal with this fun again later on. Like, I can deal with the pollution, that's a cool enough mechanic, but I'm not going to lose hours upon hours of progress because of my stuff just blowing up. That is the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen in a game, by the way. I seriously hate when machines can fail and explode and damage stuff like that. I only like stuff when it works like it should. My favorite example is literally Nuclear Craft. It's a super cool mod, but the reactors can and will explode. That's why big reactors and extreme reactors is so much better, because no matter what, those reactors will never explode. Except in the newer versions, I think. Still, you get my point. This is stupid and it shouldn't happen. Well, on the bright side, at least the sifting machine is doing well. It takes quite a while to sift through all the materials, but I have a full stack of diamonds at this point, which is pretty neat. I also have all sorts of other very high quality diamonds, so at least I can be happy about that. Another small side project I'm working on is creating a bunch of magnetic steel and then magnetic steel blocks. Why do I need these, you ask? It's actually to make a magnet. Thankfully, this isn't a magnet part for anything, it's actually a tool. When I activate this thing, it'll automatically teleport all of the items around me to my inventory. This makes mining a whole lot easier when resources are just scattered everywhere. This saved me just like countless hours of running around and picking stuff up. And for how relatively cheap it is, it's a great investment. There is one interesting thing that I noticed when I was harvesting some of my ore berries. I'm actually picking them up to replace them with other plants. But if it needs a gold block beneath it to fully mature, I might have to try that out later. Maybe that's why they're not being harvested by the machine. That's my best guess at this point. A while later, I came back to my pump and saw that it sent a bunch of mining pipes into the output. Well, that's very interesting. Apparently, the pump is done. I guess the pipe stops at a certain point. That kind of sucks because I later checked and there is way more oil down there. So I guess this means I'll have to move the pump down further. I'll do that eventually. I literally won't touch any of this oil stuff until next episode, but it's still very neat to learn about. Super long story short, I've been doing all sorts of tasks and a couple of missions to make a new crossbow. I'm using this cool alloy that has some of the best stats. It's literally a combination of magnesium and aluminum, so it's extremely expensive, which is why it's so powerful. And of course, I'm using all of the best parts possible. So this magnum for all of the parts, I used a flaming bowstring because I got some of that like flaming string from the nether or whatever. And of course, bolts with leaf fletching. And yeah, here's pretty much the best crossbow I can get, at least for now. Naturally, I decided to try and test this thing out in the Twilight Forest. It is super powerful. I love it. The crossbow is one of my favorite weapons in Minecraft, and the Tinker's Construct one. The one in the base game is cool and all. You should watch my Sky Factory 5 video to see how cool it can really get. But this one, it's nice and simple. I can get all sorts of modifiers on it. Putting redstone on the crossbow itself is the best because you can get it to rapid fire. It's a lot of fun. Since it's been such a long time since I played this mod, I've never really killed the bosses, but I kind of remember how they work. Now, the Lich did way too much damage. I didn't think it would be that bad. I think I'm in normal mode. Anyways, after retreating from this tower, I actually remembered how you fight him. I believe it's something where he has those minions that fire projectiles at you and you have to hit the projectiles back like a ghast. I believe it's something like that. Again, it's been however many years since I last saw this mod played, so I'm not 100% sure. Back in the nether, I made a neat little pump setup to extract some lava. It's literally the same thing as my oil pump, both the generator touching the pump this time, but I may have forgotten to actually load that chunk, so it's not actually going to be pumping lava for quite a while until I come back and remember to activate it. So I had a couple of different plans for what I'm working on next. The lava boiler will be in play at some point, likely in the next episode, but for now it's all going to be my original plan, which is actually solar. I've had access to solar boilers for a long time now, and I definitely should have made them, because I had no clue how powerful they were. I originally thought they were going to be pretty garbage, because they actually calcify over time, which means you have to break them and place them back to restore throughput, but I think that happens extremely slowly, so I wish I'd known that a bit sooner, because let me just tell you, these boilers are insanely overpowered. Considering all they use is the sun to create steam, yeah, that's pretty broken. I don't need to waste fuel, I don't need to waste charcoal, nothing else. Since solar sounds so powerful, what's the catch, you're wondering? Well, it's pretty expensive to make. I'm not 100% sure if there is a better glass recipe, but the second tier of solar boilers does require an expensive glass. Remember the advanced alloy I made in the last episode? Well, thankfully I can use that here again, because, you know, I made so much. On top of that, I need a bunch of other annoying and expensive parts, as you can probably all guess, and I actually need silver. But of course, not just silver. I need triple silver plates for the second tier of solar boilers. As you can probably guess, I literally need to combine 3 steel plates to make each individual one. Considering each boiler requires 3 plates, that's a lot. Thankfully, I have plenty of silver in my storage. Honestly, I'm going to admit this, I've messed up trying to say all these words several times now. Silver, steel, solar, storage. English is a very fun language, guys. Anyways, a while later, I finally have enough to make some of the boilers. My original plan was to make 25 of these, and that's what I'm going to do. But this was actually accounting for a third of their throughput. I kind of forgot that they would be at full capacity when I started using them, and they're pretty incredible. Before I realized how crazy the output of the solar boilers was, I was originally planning to just use them to create steam for the water generator right there, or water pump, whatever it is. It requires 1,500 liters of steam a second and creates a whole bunch of water based on the humidity and tier and everything like that. Obviously, I made it tier 2, which is steel, mostly because I can afford that super easily now. And this is going to be my ultimate replacement for water. Even though I can make more of the normal water tanks, they are getting a bit slow for my water consumption. I didn't realize it at the time, but this is one of those pictures taken moments before disaster. Because you can probably guess what happens. Water goes into a hot boiler. I've seen this before. Yeah, there goes my boilers. And my pipes. Now, I could have sworn I turned all of the machine explosions off. Well, I did, but like I said earlier, it didn't save properly, so I have to go do that and reset them now. Since I still believe the mechanic of exploding machines is extremely stupid, I went to creative mode to fix all of that real quick. I worked on this mostly at night, but when it was day, I covered all of the boilers with dirt. That's what I should have done from the start, now that I think about it, but oh well. This entire pack is just going to be a learning experience. And in the morning, I can immediately see the solar boilers start to working. I have to admit, these things are extremely cool. I don't know why I didn't use these earlier. Well, I guess I kind of did. The cost, I thought they would be irrelevant, but yeah, they're way more powerful than I initially expected. I love these things. And I will admit, this idea was partially inspired by a comment. I was not going to go with these, but I think I'm going to go solar all the way now. These are awesome. And I have a couple ideas for how to incorporate these in next episode. Again, since I calculated all of these to be at a third of their throughput so that they'd barely be fueling the water pump, yeah, I create 3 times the steam I actually need right now. So it's going to waste a bit of water, but not really because, you know, it's all free water that these things create. It's literally a self-powering loop. This is pretty awesome though because I will be using all of the extra steam that this thing generates later on. There were a whole bunch of clips of me just upgrading all of these pipes and stuff like that. Nothing interesting at all, so I'll skip those for the most part. I did want to note at the bottom of this entire setup, I made a massive steam tank. The maximum size is 9 by 9 and then 8 blocks tall. And yeah, I built an iron tank of that. Honestly, I could have made steel, but that's way more expensive because I don't have the cheap recipe for the steel tank. This entire time, I've actually had a better recipe for the iron tank. Instead of plates and screws, I can literally just throw the plates in an assembler, which is super nice. Unfortunately, I can't do that for steel just yet. I need the next tier, MV, to be able to do that. But either way, this tank has 10.4 million liters of capacity. That's a lot of steam. And you better prepare yourselves for when that thing is going to drain later on. It's just ridiculous. Alright, I've gotten this far into the episode and I have made 0 progress on one of the coolest buildings. That is, of course, the electric blast furnace. It's going to be one of the largest leaps in progression I've had in a long time. The only problem is it's extremely expensive to produce. First of all, I'll need to make some cupro-nickel alloy, which is quite literally copper nickel. Who could have guessed? I have a bunch of nickel ore on its own, and I've gotten a bunch from refining other ores, so that's not a problem. I needed the cupro nickel to make wires for the coils for the electric blast furnace, but I also need Invar, which is, funnily enough, another nickel product. I mean, you guys should all know this from other mod packs by now, but if you don't for some reason, Invar is a combination of iron and nickel. And now it's time to go on a wild goose chase for all sorts of different and expensive parts. To start out, I need some mica foil to actually make the cupro nickel coil blocks. This is going to be fun to pronounce. It's all going to be a combination of raw rubber dust, asbestos, and silicon dioxide. Silicon dioxide comes in several different forms. I have a bunch of nether quartz and stuff like that, so it's easy enough. Alright, those are all a bit ridiculous. Then I need a whole bunch of carbon dust and carbon plates. These are pretty interesting. You just need to compress and then throw the ingots into the bending machine just like anything else. But these are super neat because I can make air filters with these. You can probably see where this is going. Pollution is going to be an issue very soon. But that's not what I'm actually building. Well, kind of. I am building a pollution scrubber, but not the multi-block structure just yet. I'm building the block so that I can put it onto a muffler hatch. The hatch is what goes on top of multi-block structures to actually emit the pollution. Obviously, you don't want to cover this thing because, of course, it'll explode. By combining these two buildings, I can slightly reduce the amount of pollution that the hatch actually produces, which is very nice. To complete the coils I'll need for this machine, I need the wires that I made earlier, those are easy, molten tin, and of course, the mica foil that I've been working so hard on. It's several complicated steps, and I should definitely have automated more of this, but oh well, I'm getting very close. I'm not gonna lie, it took me at least like an hour to figure out how to set up this blast furnace. I have a feeling I'm gonna struggle a lot with multi-blocks in the future. I've tried all sorts of orientations before I finally got it to work. On top of that, I already tested it and tried to get it to work, but I just couldn't. This is because I only placed down 4 steam generators. Yeah, I don't know why my tiny brain was thinking that would be anywhere near enough. This thing literally requires 2 different power wires, at least LV ones, to work. Because this is technically an MV tier machine, so I need double the amperage or something like that. I legitimately have no clue. This is just what the book is telling me to do. All I know is that this thing eats through a ridiculous amount of power, thus steam. Once everything is finally hooked up, the steam is flowing, it's time for the moment of truth. And there we go. After 190 hours in this playthrough, I finally managed to get the electric blast furnace running. This is so beautiful. Besides the fact I can make steel a bit quicker now, the electric blast furnace unlocks a ton of new recipes and abilities for me. And I can't wait to see what I can make. Well, I already have a couple of ideas in mind. The steel was really just a test because I didn't realize how long it was going to take. I still believe the smeltery is much more efficient for converting steel dust back into ingots. But that's not what's important. There are several new alloys and things I can make using the electric blast furnace, including stuff like aluminum, which is very exciting. Aluminum is also like the most important thing in MV tier, so that's why, I need this electric blast furnace. I have plenty of aluminum already from all sorts of things. I can actually smelt down a lot of my aluminum ore berries, that's easy enough, but whenever I try to cast them, I can't make ingots yet. I can make aluminum chunks, but no ingots, sadly. That's why I need the electric blast furnace. But of course, I can't just make aluminum for free either. I also need cryolite. That's simple though because it's actually super abundant in the Twilight Forest. That's one of the major resources I mined there. Looking at it now, I was definitely confused. The aluminum recipes must be different because the quest tells you to make aluminum using cryolite, but I guess that's a different recipe. I don't know if it's better or what, but since I can make aluminum chunks in the smeltery, I can just smelt those straight into ingots. That's epic. I'm making good progress towards the next tier. Another super cool thing I can make with the electric blast furnace is redstone alloy. Not to be confused with red alloy. This stuff requires redstone, silicone, and coal dust. You're probably wondering how I get silicone. There are several ways to get silicone, it really just depends. A lot of the recipes are in the centrifuge, and I've been using either silicone dioxide, as in nether quartz and stuff like that, or I believe you can throw redstone into a centrifuge, and that works as well. Another super neat thing about the electric blast furnace is that you can actually have liquid input and output. It depends on what recipe you're making, but in this example, I'm actually going to use oxygen, which I have tons of at this point, as another catalyst, I guess. I don't know what the right word for it is, but in this example, it uses oxygen to actually speed up the recipe so that it doesn't chew up as much power, which is very nice. I had to make all sorts of new Tumbaga products. That stuff is super annoying to deal with, but this is all to make another type of building. Well, I already have it technically, but this is an energy version of it, a simple ore washer. Why would I want a simple ore washer when I have all of the other advanced ones? Well, I need this just in case my other ore washers are already being used, and I just need stuff like dust washed so that I don't have to use a cauldron anymore. It's nothing extremely special, but it comes in handy. I've been working on a very important thing in the background. You guys might have seen a tiny bit of it, and that's all the resources in this chest, but I am trying to make Damascus steel. The primary issue is that Damascus steel requires all sorts of incredibly rare resources. For example, magnesium, chrome, molybdenum, whatever that stuff is, MO, that element. Long story short, you can get a bunch of these from different ores and stuff by, refining and processing them. Thankfully, it's possible to get chrome out of ruby ore, which is pretty neat actually. Since I have plenty of ruby ore in storage, because I think that's in redstone veins, that's easy enough. It took me a ton of time just like sorting through crafting recipes, looking through all of my storage, refining stuff, but I finally am able to make Damascus steel. This is going to be a pretty awesome upgrade, especially for my tools and stuff like that. Plus, it's kind of a big step in progression either way. Even though I could have technically made it before, I couldn't really use it up until now, because I finally have the ability, thanks to the electric blast furnace, to actually process it into ingots and then use it. Another neat little building I made is this arc furnace. It's actually relatively cheap and not too difficult to make, for what it sounds like at least. Now, it doesn't have a ton of uses. Its major thing is like recycling blocks and stuff like that. But if I throw in oxygen and copper, I can make annealed copper. I don't know what's so special about this. All I know is that a lot of recipes can use it, and it's just like copper, but better, I guess. Apparently, it's also good for wires in the MV tier, so that's probably why they want me to make it. At this point, I'm just working on all sorts of random stuff, mostly a bunch of quests. One neat thing I really wanted to do, that I'm doing now, is make an alternative to torches, which is actually glowstone nooks. Now, I've actually known about this for a long time. It's in all sorts of mod packs, but pretty much you can cut up one glowstone and get a ton of tiny light sources out of it. It's pretty awesome. My next project is going to be making concrete. Yes, actual concrete this time, not the brownstone. Concrete requires all sorts of stone-based materials, stone dust, clay dust, calcite, quartz sand, all that good stuff. Throw it in a mixer with some water and you have wet concrete. All that's left to do is throw it into a fluid solidifier, and I have concrete blocks. It's pretty simple. On top of that, I wanted to mention that I'm throwing a lot of the stone dust that I have into a centrifuge. This gives me all sorts of resources, most of which I don't really care about, but it actually gives me marble dust, which is not required for concrete. I don't know why I threw that in here, but if you throw that into a centrifuge, you can actually get calcite dust and magnesium out of it, which is awesome. Those are both super important and super rare. The last neat machine setup that I'm making in this episode, it's actually one of my favorites. It's super simple, like extremely simple, but it's so neat. It takes a mixer and combines water and dirt. I've been collecting tons of dirt recently, and it turns those into wet mud. The wet mud gets thrown into a fluid extractor, which creates clay. The clay then goes into a compressor to create clay blocks. It's quite literally free clay. Okay, not actually free, but you get what I'm saying. Pretty dang close. Considering how useful clay is, I love this setup. I don't actually have any footage of what I've been working on this entire time, but I will say I've been expanding my base. At the end of all of this recording, I reached 200 hours of playtime in this pack. That's just ridiculous. And there was barely any AFKing in it. So I hope you all enjoyed this video, and as always, thank you very much for watching. I always appreciate it, and a special thank you to my channel members. You guys are all awesome. And this is going to be Enzo from LookIntoGaming, signing out.